and welcome to Hypothetically Intentional, where we ask the question, what if we set intentions with everything we do? I'm your co-host, Michelle, and today we have a special guest. Jake is back with us again today. Welcome, Jake.
Hello, welcome back. Hey,
It's good
hold
to have
on.
you here.
We got a cat situation. He's getting kicked
And we
out.
also have Jake's cat, Hector, who is here causing a ruckus with Jacob. So,
Yep, he's been removed from the premises.
all right. So, would you like to set an intention for today, Jake?
Sure. I will think about it for a second here. My intention is to have a good time despite being annoyed with recording difficulties and other technical issues.
All right, let's just take a breath together because I'm with you. Tech problems are like, they make me want to throw things across the room, and I'm not a throw things across the room kind of person. So I'm going to inhale and I'm going to exhale and I'm going to pretend. I'm not even going to pretend. I'm just going to set the intention that I'm starting from here,
That's
which is kind
that's
of
a
what you
good
just said.
start. Yeah, that makes sense.
So you and I talked a
I
little
don't know
bit
if
before. What? Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I don't know if you could hear on the microphone, but I did a big breath as well for anybody who couldn't hear it,
Oh, yeah, it was
just to
hard. I
narrate
didn't
my
hear it.
actions. Yeah.
Your accountability. We talked a little bit before today, kind of discussing, do we want to find a video? Do we have something else we want to talk about? And we kind of circled around the idea of talking about travel and how much that teaches us. Are you still on
Yeah.
board with that topic?
Yeah, I think so. I didn't necessarily find like an article that went super well with anything I wanted to talk about, but I think that is a good place to start. Yes. Okay, so recently I was on a trip to St. Louis because I have a friend who lives down there temporarily. He's in med school down there, and so we took a road trip down to go visit him. Um, and I think it was a very good trip. It was super fun to see everybody, spend time with everybody, and there was also, I guess, it's a big enough group of people, and just it's sort of one of those things where everything is always running behind where you expect, like where you planned, right? Um, the I don't know if that's something that you've experienced on your trips, maybe not because you travel with different kinds of people than I do, but it's just sort of like, it started off, we were going to meet at one person's house and leave our cars there, and we were going to take two cars down to St. Louis. And we planned to leave at about 9:30 in the morning. And, there were a few delays along that path, and we ended up leaving quite a bit later. We left at like 11. And so we were, behind schedule from the get-go. And like I remember waking up and like seeing a couple people messaging in the chat, like that we had, oh, we have this thing's going on, that's going on, and like, understandable delays, right? Particularly when, some of the people were gonna be down there for quite a while, and it's just like a big trip to prepare for. And I remember like waking up first thing and being like annoyed when I saw that we were gonna be late, right? Uh, and then, pretty quickly from there, um, one of the people had like a family thing come up that she needed to help with, and kind of last minute, and that happens, right? And I was like, well, I don't really want to be like, it's one of those things where I can be annoyed by this and spend the whole trip annoyed, the whole drive down annoyed that we left like an hour and a half later, or I can like try to be understanding and try to like have some grace there and just like, okay, like things come up, things happen. Like, we specifically said we were going to leave early so that we had a little bit of wiggle room, and I'm just going to go with the flow here and trying to
So you used your wiggle room at the beginning.
yes, trying to give up some of the wanting everything to go exactly as planned, right? Um, because a lot of the times when we do go on trips like this, my friends and I, right, particularly like we've been to St. Louis before when our friend Tim was moving down there. We had gone to like before he'd even moved, right, to look at apartments and just kind of check out the city. Um, And, on that trip, like nobody had experience in the city, and I kind of ended up being the one who planned a lot of things, right? That's the thing that happens when there's a lack of experience in a particular area, is I will often be the one to plan things. And not that that's a bad thing, but it's like very different than how this trip went. So, like I have the instinct to like try to make sure everybody has a good time and that like we're running on schedule and everything like that. And I had very quickly to let that go, like before we even left for St.
Before you
Louis.
even got
Um,
started.
exactly. And I think it went well. Like I think, I was able to reframe my thinking a little bit and like, okay, well, I can't control this. And it's not like there was no like intentional, negligence or harm or anything like that. It was just like a normal delay. Um, and I think like after my initial wave of like, well, what the heck? I like, it was fine. I was happy and, I was okay with us leaving later and made the most of the time, and it all, you know, that was kind of the first, the way to set up the trip, I guess, for
Yeah.
me.
I think travel in general, even if you're traveling alone, has this way
Hmm.
of requiring us to loosen the reins a bit. Like it, because inevitably when you're
Yeah.
traveling, and not every time, but inevitably when you're traveling, the chances of the moving parts to all move exactly as they should, or you think they should, is slim to none, it seems. And I think part of that is, I don't know, at least for me, and I'm much better now than I used to be. And I'll tell you, my first trip to Thailand definitely helped me with that. I remember watching my
Hmm.
teacher navigate 12 people in a country they've never been to, that has a very different vibe culturally than this one does. And I just remember thinking, I was so attached to the clock when we first got there, and I was so worried we were going to be late for things. And then I realized there's such a thing as what I call Thai time, which means there's not really a dedicated time for anything. They just are in flow, it seems, and I find that beautiful now. But it was a weird, difficult adjustment the first time. And then coming home was difficult then too, because I wasn't attached to the clock. And then suddenly it's like, oh, wait, hang on. I actually have like deadlines and, appointments that do matter what time
Hmm.
I show up and those kind of things. So, but I think even outside of that, like, I mean, that was a little bit of a segue into the Thailand trip, but travel in general, you're out of your comfort zone unless it's a place you've gone to again and again and again. And then when you add the dynamics of other people into it, right? Then it gets interesting. I'm going to use the word interesting because everybody shows up differently. And like if you want to really learn how people tick, go on a trip together. There's lots of things you can do, right? Start a fire together. see how that
Right.
works. There's just so many things, like a
Hmm.
campfire. I mean, like how do
Well, there's,
I'm not talking arson
both would
here. I'm
work.
talking like a campfire. But it's just like I was at an event. It was actually a training with my coach, and there were a group of us there, and it was like decided that we were going to start a campfire, and then we, quote unquote, we as a group starting a campfire, and I very quickly was just like, yeah, I'm out. I'm not going to be part of this process because there were too many that needed control and and they all had different ways about how to do it, and they managed it and navigated it actually quite well, but it's like they didn't need another person in the way. If they would have needed more resources, I would have been happy to go get them. But I very quickly was like, we have way too many people who are confident in how to build a fire, and they all do it differently. I feel like travel's that way too, right? Like we
Hmm.
all have our own preferences of how we would like to do things or on how we would like to navigate a trip. Plus, then if you have like reservations or if a wrench gets thrown in the plan, suddenly it's like, oh, okay. And I just like in the now, as I'm talking about that, I'm just thinking about like attachment, right? If I'm attached to the trip going exactly one
Hmm.
kind of way, that's going to create a stressful, angsty trip for me. And I would much rather just be like, all right, I have this time off. There's like I don't have any true agenda if it's that kind of a trip, right? It's like, other than I would like to be here this day. That would be lovely if we could achieve that goal. I guess my point is I have my goals looser when I travel, especially with other people.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But that's funny
It's
that
funny you
you had
mentioned
the the wiggle room, and then very quickly it was just like, okay, well, that's gone.
Well, yeah, you mentioned Thai time, and we have a thing in my friend group that we call Tim time, which is very similar to Thai time, but it's we make the most of it. So it's one of those things that at times it could be a little bit frustrating, but we kind of all know it's coming, and so we'll just we'll like on our trip most recently, like we were planning to meet at like a coffee shop, right? And we hadn't heard from Tim yet. We didn't know if he was up yet, so we are just like, well, we'll just go and we'll meet him there when he gets there, So we just would do things like that.
Yeah.
And, it's it's really not a problem for us. So once you learn to set your expectations appropriately, and like we don't really need to be on a strict clock, and we can just kind of go with the flow.
Dan and I have learned that when we travel, like instead of saying, hey, let's everybody meet at, we're more like, we will be at this place at this time, because we're a 15 minutes early is on time couple. And that brings us joy. And it's just so, or like, I know, if you have friends that typically run behind, it's like if appointment is at 6, it's like, hey, we're going to meet up at 5:30. And you like whatever their gap is. Some people are 30 minutes late is on time. Some people are 15 minutes early is on time. Yeah. Some people are even more than that, right? It just depends. I mean, sometimes I'm more than 15 minutes early, but I don't go in. I just get to the area and explore. Because sometimes I'm like, ooh, I want to go explore this place anyway. I'm just going to leave an hour early so that I can get there an hour early, And then I'm just going to explore the area and the neighborhood, because I'm not the person that wants to land on a doorstep an hour early either. Right? Like, no, I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Makes sense. You mentioned too, like being like with making the fire, right? Having too many people who want to control how it's going. I think it's actually like sometimes more the opposite when I travel with a lot of my friends. Like everybody kind of just wants to like do whatever we're doing, and people oftentimes don't want to like be the one to like make those decisions, right? Because like, what if it's the kind of Minnesota nice thing? Like, what if that's not what people really want to do? And so like that first trip when none of us knew what we were doing, like we had certain things that like everybody wanted to do, but when there was like empty time, like it often felt like it was tough to figure out what people actually wanted, right? And that is similar in some ways, like to everybody wanting to control what's happening, in that like things won't necessarily get done.
Yeah.
But it is a little bit of a different fix, I feel like, rather than step out. Sometimes you just have to be like, oh, let's do this. And if people don't want to do that, then they can speak up at that point.
Well, it sounds to me like you're the competent leader, or a competent leader. Maybe not the leader. Maybe that's not fair.
Maybe not correct. Yeah.
I didn't mean the leader. I just mean like you're a person who's competent and who is willing to take action. Because not everybody is a doer in those. Like not everybody wants to be a leader or is good at it. And so it's like knowing totally your roles. It's kind of that. Well, it sounds like too on Definitely. This trip. People show you who they are and where their strengths are. And when you can figure out where people's strengths are and like, encourage that or foster that, it's so helpful, your own included. I'm not talking about like, this isn't coming from judgment or like any sort of like, you should be different kind of way. It's a more like I really enjoy figuring out people's strengths and then leaning into those and learning my strengths and then using those and also acknowledging and accepting my weaknesses and knowing that I need an outside source for that because it's not my forte and I shouldn't even be attempting those, But I think when you start really observing and paying more attention to the world, which travel can just sometimes almost force that upon you, where you really are kind of required to look just because of the things that are happening in the travel agenda, whatever that looks like. I think travel is such a beautiful way to learn about yourself, about others, about, the world. I mean, that's broad, but like depending on where you're traveling, like I think it's such an amazing way to grow.
Yeah. And like this trip too, like you're talking about with knowing where your role is in a group, right? Like now that Tim's been living down there for over a year, like he had great activities planned for us. Like we got there and we had something going on every day that was super cool, and like he knew about because he's been in the area. And even like the day we got there, right? We got down at like 8 or 9 p.m. and we had we were out in at some of his favorite spots to get like food and drinks that night. And then like the next day he had more plans for us, and the day after, and
That's
it was
cool.
super cool.
That's my favorite thing when we
So yeah, it's
travel.
definitely, I don't mean to paint the picture of like I'm the only one who
No,
makes
I
any
didn't take
decisions.
it
That's
that
definitely
way.
not how it
And I didn't
goes.
mean to imply that either. But it is, I mean, when people realize who the people who are willing to take the lead are, they lean into that. And
Hmm.
I love my favorite way. So I love that Tim was like, oh, I got things now because I know, right? So he's a local. That's my favorite thing
Hmm.
when I travel. Like, I want to
Yeah.
know where the locals go. I want to know where the people who live
Hmm.
there, where they go, what they enjoy.
Hmm.
Because I don't know,
Yeah.
touristy things for me often are kind of that same thing where it's like there's a schedule, there's a timeline, you're in a group, you're not really learning. I mean, that's not true, I guess. You do learn things on tours, but like for me, I want to go to like, the back roads, little tiny hole in the wall restaurants and enjoy, I don't want to go to a chain. I want to go to
Hmm.
I don't know. I just want to explore like what the people of the place do because that's exciting to
Yeah.
me.
Hmm. Yeah, it's a good way too to, like you said, get more perspectives of how different people in different places do things. Like part of it when I travel at least is like, well, I don't really have anything else to worry about other than me
Yeah.
traveling, right? So you can kind of have more space for um, changing up your routine quite a bit, right? And like you said in Thailand, like not being so reliant on the clock and just kind of doing things the way that the locals do them. Because like, what's the worst that's going to happen, right? You're just there on a trip, and if you hate it, you go back to normal when you get home,
Right.
right? Um, I don't know, just being able to be a little bit more adaptable when kind of all you're worried about is the trip that you're on is neat.
So do you find that you bring that in then? Like, I mean, because you noticed that, and maybe you've noticed that on other trips as well, but it sounds like this trip you really, like, you were observing yourself in a certain state and then choosing that you preferred to be in a different sort of state, that you didn't want to be in that state for the entire trip. This is like personal development 101. It's like observing and
Hmm.
learning, like, do you want to be in that state? Because if you don't want to, then how can you make choices that adjust that state? And sometimes it's not a lot of choices, and sometimes there's a whole lot, like you just surrendered into, okay, well, we're
Hmm.
going to be 2 hours later than we thought we were going to be. And that is the reality. And I'm choosing
Hmm.
to accept that rather than bucking it the entire way, right? Like you could have been a total jerk the
Right.
entire trip, been like, well, we're 2 hours later than we were supposed to be. Let's kick her down and hope we don't get a ticket, been good old Minnesota passive
Hmm.
aggressive.
Right.
But did you find you brought
I
it
don't
back
know.
then and like you're now noticing that more just in day to day, maybe at work or just in your daily schedule?
I feel like it hasn't like been super applicable lately for me. Like I think, um, yeah, not a ton. I'm trying to think of like a time that it might have come up because like not really is such a boring answer, but the trip was pretty recent, and so like it's not like there's been all that much that's happened to me in the
But do
meantime.
you feel like there was a
Um,
time where you wouldn't have been able to see that, where you wouldn't have been able to make that choice, where you just would have
oh,
been
absolutely,
frustrated
yeah,
the whole trip? I mean, I feel like
yeah,
I feel like
absolutely.
you've done a lot of intentional work to make sure that you're not showing up in that way. Where like when you get frustrated, like that's it, you're going to be frustrated and there's no way out. I like that's not,
Hmm.
and I'm not saying like you were that way, or I'm just saying like
No, it's okay. You can say that.
well, I used to be that way. I was talking more about me. Like, I mean, I
Yeah.
used to be so like, well, I'm frustrated and I'm just going to be that way for a while. I'm going to be that way until I'm not, without
Hmm.
any sort of intention or choices or actions to get me out of that. And I feel like what you just described
Right.
on that trip is you noticing you were frustrated, or it was on its way, or you were frustrated, but then also realizing that like, well, you don't really want your whole trip to be that way.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah, I think that's a good assessment of what happened there. I'm trying to think of like if there's anything specific I did to get out of the frustrated, right? And I think it might just be as easy as like, oh, recognizing, hey, I am frustrated because we're leaving later than I wanted to, but I can't do anything about it. And it's not like there was any like, it's not like anybody's like malicious negligence or anything like that that's caused this. Like, there's nobody to be mad at, really. And even if there was, right, like, well, this is the reality now,
yeah.
so I may as well go have a good time with my
Well,
friends.
and realizing that you're in a group of people and that comes with consequences. I mean, good
Yeah.
or bad, it does. And the flip side of
Hmm.
that is you might want to sit down and have a healthy boundaries class with your friends. So they say no and can honor time. I'm just
Yeah.
kidding.
That makes sense.
All right.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything really beyond just like, yeah, I don't really want to be frustrated this whole trip, so I'm going to choose not to. And obviously that doesn't work every time, right?
No,
But
but I think there's
just
something
finding
about
it there.
developing the skill of being able to witness and observe and then make mindful choices that is very different than being
Yeah.
reactive. I think for me, that's sort
Hmm.
of how I describe it.
Well,
Like the
like,
shift from, I used to be a very reactive person, and now I prefer to respond with like a mindful choice that leads me somewhere, as opposed
yeah.
to just keeps me in the stew or the swirl of whatever I'm in any given moment.
When like the reaction is there regardless, right? Like that part doesn't go
Oh yeah, that like
away and probably
instantaneous.
shouldn't
Yeah.
go away like that. Yeah, the like the feelings that are sparked by things that happen around you, like those things are going to happen, like, and you can't really control them, right? Like we all have like intrusive thoughts that we don't like, or like get upset about something that is not like the person that upsets you's fault. Um, and like those things exist, but then yeah, like you said, being able to um like not take that instant reaction as this is how I feel now, like end of story,
Right.
right? Like it's okay to feel that way, and then you know be move on from that, right?
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
Yeah. I think
I
that's
think there's like
a great skill.
a some kind of like quote or something I feel like I've heard, like your initial reaction to something, like your gut reaction to something doesn't define who you are. It's like the second reaction after you've thought about it or whatever.
Yeah. And
And I
sometimes
don't
that
remember,
first,
that's like not the whole quote, but like,
I was just going to say, sometimes that first reaction gives you clues as to like where there's work that you can do, right? Like if something sets
and
me off, sometimes there's a reason for that and I can figure it out, right? And sometimes it's just happens to
awesome.
be how I was on that day. Doesn't always have to be like this deep, dark trigger, right? But sometimes it is. And
Right.
like, I think just exploring
Yeah.
that and being willing to explore how we experience life is how we learn and grow. And it doesn't always have to be like, I'm in doing the deep, hard work. Sometimes it can simply be, I'm in the experience of today. And that's not about doing the
Hmm.
personal growth work, right? It's just about like, I don't know. For me, I guess my intention is always to learn something and to show up better than I did the day before, but it doesn't necessarily mean I'm like deep in a healing process of something that is, requires a ton of work.
Yeah, that
There are
makes sense.
times it's that. There are times where it's a good chunk of time where it's that. And I know I'm in it and I'm doing it and that's the thing. But my point is, it doesn't always have to be that way. I just think it's cool that you noticed right
Hmm.
out of the gate, like, and caught it before you even left. That's cool.
Hmm. Yeah, that was definitely good, I think, for the everybody's enjoyment of the trip. So,
So that feels full circle. And I think that's a wrap for today. You can like and subscribe. If you did, we would appreciate it. You can find us on social media. And by us, I probably just mean me because Jacob's not really on social
oh
media.
no,
What?
I'll know if you like it. I'll know.
Oh, you'll know. Yes, he will see it. He will know if you
Yeah,
like it.
I won't see it. I'll just know.
Okay. So you can go to michellealbers.com, AALB as in boy, ERS, JD Wellness on Facebook, JD Studio on Instagram, and reach out and contact us. We're always happy to hear from you. That's it. Bye. Be you every day. See you next time.
Bye.